Having me. My name is Erin Palm. I'm a general surgeon and surgical intensivist practicing at a Kaiser hospital in Northern California. I spend most of my time at a company called Suki AI, building a digital voice assistant for doctors to do documentation and other tasks in their EHR. Happy to chat more about that at any time with any of you. The topic I've been asked to speak about today is opportunities for getting involved with industry in ways that aren't necessarily building your own company or licensing technology that you've developed, but how can you get involved with industry either full-time or part-time to get your ideas built, contribute to go to market, contribute in all variety of ways to companies building the next great healthcare technologies. My disclosures, I do work full-time in a management role for Suki. I also sit on a subsidiary board for a mental health company in the digital health space called Lyra Health. As I mentioned, my objective today is to provide an overview of the different roles surgeons can play in corporate environments and give you some practical ideas of how you might get involved and target those roles that you're interested in and do really interesting things to bring your clinical expertise to bear on technologies that these companies are developing. So what I want to do is go through a number of these career paths and introduce you maybe to some roles that maybe coming from clinical medicine you may not be as aware of in companies, either startups or large companies. And I'll wrap up with an example of a consulting opportunity with a device company, which might be sort of along the lines more of you are thinking about. But I wanted to also introduce some of these full-time career paths. And I'm going to do that using examples of some friends of mine and folks who I've run into in the course of my career and who I admire. I'll talk about my own path a little bit when we get to the product management slide. But first, I'm going to kick off by talking about a leader in minimally invasive surgery who we all admire, and a number of you might be aware of, also a SAGES member, Miriam Curet. And now I know Dr. Curet wears a number of hats at Intuitive Surgical, where she's been the chief medical officer now for a number of years. I actually spoke with her specifically about the clinical and medical affairs aspect of her roles and responsibilities, because this is the area I first wanted to talk with you all about. What does a clinical affairs leader do in a company like Intuitive or a medical device company or pharma company in general? Typically, this is a person who's designing and implementing clinical studies and trials within the company. And I spoke with Dr. Curet a bit about how does a person in this role learn the regulatory function and what does the FDA approval process look like? Because often the clinical affairs person will be adjacent to that function. And her advice, and what I found in my role as well, is a lot of that is on-the-job learning from your colleagues and counterparts. Typically, the qualifications for a medical affairs hire in a medical device company will be a track record in academia, a publication record in a particular area of specialization, and also experience working with industry to collaborate on trials, design and conduct clinical trials. She was telling me that typically a person wouldn't be working up their way through a clinical operations org, but rather experienced academic physicians are often hired in as heads of clinical affairs in these companies. And then when I asked Dr. Curet for advice for you all, she advised approaching the role with humility. We all have a lot to contribute from our expertise, but there's also a way of interacting in a corporate setting that we have to learn from others around us. So approach the role with humility and a learning mindset. The next area I want to talk about in terms of participating in an executive team in the corporate setting is a sales or go-to-market role. And these are folks who are driving customer relationships, driving revenue, often they're quota carrying, and their real incentive is to get deals done, but they're also really an advocate for the customer to make sure that the product is providing value. Oftentimes in medicine, we have sort of a bias against the sales and go-to-market teams, and actually Dr. Curette from the last slide told me one of the things she did in Intuitive was shadow a sales leader for a day to understand what they were doing, and it really broke through some of her biases. I wanted to highlight an individual who I admire. Dr. Lopez works with Google Cloud, and I've actually worked with him through a Suki partnership with Google. He is the market lead for healthcare and life sciences solutions for the Americas, and his clinical background and also his Spanish language skills serves him in this role, but also his business background. He was a chief medical officer for United Health Group for a period of time in different regions, and that exposure to healthcare business models certainly serves him in his role at Google today. And the next area I wanted to talk about, and this may be an area that is a good entry point and accessible to a lot of folks with clinical backgrounds, especially with clinical administration skill sets, is operations roles in particular digital health companies that have a services component to their business. And both of these examples are folks in fast-growing telehealth companies. Jeff Stanley is in Virta Health, which is a diabetes coaching platform. And Melinda Barnes is with Row, that's a direct-to-consumer digital health, sort of telehealth platform. And when I was talking with Jeff about his role at Virta, certainly he came in to roll up his sleeves and build the telehealth practice sort of state by state for Virta. He's had opportunities to wear a lot of hats since he was on the ground in early days of Virta Health. But he got there because he was pursuing a passion in obesity medicine and diabetes management, and has really been in at the ground floor of a very exciting company. One theme that sort of struck me as I was talking to these various friends of mine in preparation for this talk is how happy they are with the career choices they made, despite, in Jeff's case, taking a pretty tremendous risk to join an early stage startup. It's really paid dividends in terms of career satisfaction. So in terms of the product management role, now when I titled the talk, How to Get Companies to Build Your Ideas, the role that touches that most specifically is product management. The scope of responsibility is defining and executing on a product roadmap. That said, any clinical team member, particularly at an earlier stage company, will have pretty tremendous and direct influence on a product roadmap and on product design and development. That's one of the things that Jeff and Melinda have highlighted to me as well. They're able to work directly with the product teams and with the designers to design the systems that the doctors need to deliver services. But when you're hands-on responsible for this, there's a lot of nuts and bolts of coordination between the technical and the commercial teams to make sure products launch and you get feedback from users, and that there is a business model behind and a business rationale behind the products that the engineering team's working on. So this has been an interesting learning curve for me over the past 4 years. I've certainly relied on my MBA background and on the network I developed when I went to business school, but a lot of the learning has been on the ground from mentors in product management and technology, and it is a fascinating look back in time to think about what I've learned as a product manager. Happy to chat about it in more detail. Last but not least, a lot of surgeons get involved with technology companies to do design consulting on devices in particular that are being developed in their field of specialization. And my friend Anand Veeravagu, who's a spine surgeon at Stanford, is a great example of this. Anand's advice was to think about how your clinical specialization can be applied to advance your field when you get involved with a device company. Having specific current hands-on experience in a subspecialty area of medicine is often what device companies are looking for. And Anand also gave me some good advice about getting compensated for your time doing consulting work. So there is some sensitivity around Stark laws and any inkling of a pay-for-play scenario. Anand's advice was run far and run fast. You should be expected to earn fair market value for the services you're providing based on your specialty. And that'll either be in the form of cash, equity, and or licensing fees. I think there are other speakers talking about IP and licensing. So if we talk a bit about cash and equity, if you're working for an early stage company, you should have a sense for how to value that company's equity, and not just at its current value, but the expected growth of that equity value over time. Because in cash terms, almost certainly working for any company in industry, big or small, in cash terms, you're going to be likely taking a pay cut from your current cash compensation in clinical practice. And the compensation will be made up in terms of equity. So if you're working for a small startup and getting equity compensation, think about the potential of that company's growth over time and how much that equity may be worth. And that's how to think about the value of your comp package working with, in particular, a startup. So I hope this sort of perspective from a few of my friends and colleagues and folks I admire who've gone the route of working either part-time or full-time in industry is helpful to you. I think one of the main takeaways is to reflect on your motivation for doing this. And if you feel that this is a way to make a difference and advance your field and apply your specialized knowledge, then that's sort of the right mindset to jump in with. Understand specifically the value that you're adding to the company. You know, I have plenty of folks calling me up and giving me advice on how to develop Suki. Understanding a particular area that you can comment on and advance the product or the company or the business forward is very much appreciated when you reach out to somebody to express an interest in getting involved in their company. Target the role that you're interested in. So if it is consulting with the product and design team on product development, reach out to executives in that role. If you're interested on the go-to-market side, if you can make introductions, if you want to help drive sales or marketing or messaging, that's another option. Or the clinical affairs route is certainly of interest if you have experience designing clinical studies. Reach out to the executive leading that function. Start up a conversation. It may not pan out today or tomorrow, but creating those relationships and contacts a year from now, 2 years from now, actually for me, 10 years down the road, an investor that I'd gotten to know as a friend introduced me to the company I'm working for now. So keep track of people who inspire you and who you admire in the field, because you never know where that relationship may lead in the future. And finally, bring a learning mindset. It's a completely different environment from surgical practice to work in a corporate setting. From having meetings scheduled back-to-back on my calendar all day long to just the team interactions to the documentation that's expected is quite different and is a learning curve. So bring humility, bring a learning mindset, and you'll be rewarded with a lifelong learning curve and impact and variety and new friends and all kinds of things. So with that, thank you and good luck. And please do feel free to reach out, email me. You want to hear about, more about my path or even careers at Suki or Suki product itself. Feel free to reach out. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and enjoy the rest of the day.